So hello, we are here with Giorgia Milne, and she is a biodynamic cranial touch teacher, and also she's teaching associated or related topics to this work, to the work of body work and stillness touch. And I'm welcoming Giorgia here in Prague. And I would have a first question: what got you to the work, or how you got to the work of biodynamic cranial touch?
It's quite a story. I'll try to give you the shorter version. There's a long version and a short version. The short version is I was already working in a medical profession and seeing patients and doing the normal medical thing, diagnosis, treatment, prescription, therapies, management of all kinds of problems. So this was the scenario that I was in. And in the US, there came a change where the management of such kinds of treatments were becoming restricted. I had to see more and more people in shorter and shorter amount of time, and very quickly it became something I was not comfortable with.
And so what was your area in the medical?
General medicine, internal medicine, general medicine, yeah. I did that for almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. However, this pressure of feeling out of integrity every time I let somebody walk out of the room when I knew I hadn't addressed what was really going on, and it just felt like too much pressure. And I went into a little bit of a crisis because I've already have this profession. I am complete in my life. Nowhere else to go. But it became a very internal kind of struggle, really, a crisis almost, a spiritual crisis almost. And inside of me it was, okay, God, if not this, if I'm not meant to be doing this, then what? And that question, I burned with that question internally for almost a year, and it kept getting tighter and tighter squeeze, more and more uncomfortable. And one day, just out of the blue, normal circumstances, nothing special happening, I got an answer. And the answer happened first as a experience. It was actually something going on in my body, and it was the sense of my hands becoming like an emanation of liquid light, something I couldn't quite describe. It's not liquid, it's not light, but it had substance. And I sat with that for a while, and pretty soon it became all of me, and then I recognized it was all of everything, and it felt so unconditionally loving and benevolent and healthy and good and all those. And at that point I had inside myself the inquiry, okay, so I understand, I think I'm being guided to put the stethoscope down, you know, that the put the stethoscope down, and I need to touch. I need to touch directly with my hands. That was very clear, just the direct feeling. But then the question of, okay, but what modality? I couldn't imagine myself going to massage school after working in medicine, but I thought, okay, what modality? And then I heard a voice, not my own. It was as if every atom of every molecule of everything was speaking. And it literally said these words. It said, "You will find the answer to your life's dream through cranial sacral work." I didn't talk about that to anyone for some time because I thought, you know, in medicine, you're crazy if you have these experiences, if you hear voices. But I had enough experience in meditation and in non-ordinary states of consciousness, all kinds of other practices, that I understood the guidance.
All right.
And it was funny because at the time I thought, okay, I know what a cranium is, and I know what a sacrum is, but I never heard of cranial sacral work.
So you never heard about it before?
Nope. And unfortunately in the US at that time, I knew about osteopaths, but all the osteopaths were functioning like regular doctors. And in fact, the regular doctors always had not very good things to say about osteopaths as being like something lesser, yeah? But it took me some years before I found out what the origin of the lineage and what the deep essence of the work is. And that connected to that original experience.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically from there that led me through this turn, that turn, all these synchronicities to eventually wind up at Esalen Institute, which is a beautiful retreat center in California.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a participant in a class given by Fritz Smith, who's medical doctor, osteopath, acupuncturist. He's a lovely man. He's still alive and still teaching occasionally, and he does a work called zero balancing. So I went to this class, all the while knowing, well, it's not cranial sacral work, but it came from the cranial, from the Upledger cranial pamphlet. So I thought, maybe it's close enough. I just knew I had to go to that class. And then it was in that class that I met my former husband, Hugh Milne. He was also there as a participant. And when I first met him, I didn't know who he was. I had heard of his name, but I had never known him. So for the first 2 or 3 days, I didn't even connect, knowing that that's who he was. But we started sparking from the beginning. And so from there, we were very quickly in relationship. And as soon as I moved to Big Sur to live with him and be with him, that's when I started traveling with him and formally learning what cranial sacral work is. I met Charles there, and it was Charles who also pointed me to the lineage and to the work of Becker and James Jealous. And so then the pieces all started to fall together. But that original impulse came out of the blue, out of a moment of crisis and sincere openness of, now what, you know?
Thank you, and it's very powerful as you're saying it. And when you're there was this first moment of like really touching it, experiencing it.
It's unequivocal.
It's like, I have the word like initiation from the inside, sort of. But when you're speaking about it, and there's this quality that kind of led you met it first, and then it connected when you met it like second time.
It feels like it's been a guiding principle, quite literally. Yeah.
And somehow I'm imagining that your work really must be coming out from this place.
Yeah, it is informed by that. Yes. And I found a resonance and a relief first when I first met Charles, because I met him maybe 6 months after I was with Hugh, and we were together in the same class on an assistant team for Hugh. And the moment that I met Charles, there was an immediate, even nonverbal connection. And I've said this before, it's that I knew that he knew that I knew that he knew that I knew what this thing, whatever this thing was. And then as I got to know him and we were talking and I would share my experience, he had the words for it. He had the words for it, and he's the one who pointed me towards the biodynamic. And so then I just, that was like ping, that was it. That was...
Yeah, it sounds like there was a shift, sort of like a next phase after he pointed you to biodynamics.
And that grew parallel to my being, I was fully immersed in my former husband's school and work and life. I mean, there it was that idealized marriage, the marriage of the masculine and feminine, the marriage in the actual life, the marriage of the work and the life work being all one thing. It was quite I thought it was the dream. And it was for a while. It really was. It was a beautiful time. And as beautiful as many aspects of Hugh's work was for me at that time and is, it still wasn't the it. It wasn't the it. So this it's given me such a discerning quality of when I can sense that it's the it or not. And the only other places that I was hearing it or reading it was from some of Sutherland's, well, from Andrew Taylor Still's, few places it points towards it, and William Sutherland it points towards it, certainly with Becker and Dr. Jellis, who's a contemporary. And that's the only other places I was feeling that connection with that it.
Like this it is like really make me wondering, and I presume that it's difficult to bring it to words.
It is.
And it's even difficult how to ask on it.
Well, William Sutherland, bless his heart, tried his best. Be still and know I am, and trust the tide. It's really all there. And I used to live near to Pacific Grove, and I'd go hang out by the graves. And his says the be still and know, but his wife Ada, who was with him for the whole journey, hers says I am. So the be still and know I am points to the it. And the trust the tide points to the it. At least for me. At least for me, it was very clear that that's what was the message trying to get across.
And when you're saying these phrases, I know that the word phrase doesn't fit because it's a pointer and it's very deep.
But we hear it all the time in the cranial field, don't we? Right, but I think people don't, they understand it maybe conceptually, maybe, but I don't know how many people fully understand it in a bodily sense and really do get what it's about.
And when you're saying fully understanding it in a bodily sense, I don't know if to take some other metaphor to help us or to help you. Can you maybe develop it a little bit more? Because, yeah.
Well, what comes to mind, and I don't know if this will answer the question, but what comes to mind is to honor not only the lineage, the osteopathic lineage, but to also honor many other traditions and paths that speak to it in their own way. So I think it's an essential thing, and it's essential to all human beings. It's not something separate from us. And maybe people from this culture will have a certain way of naming it, and people from another culture will name it a different way. And different religions will hold it in different ways. I was raised in an Italian Catholic family, so I have the Catholicism and that Christianity as my background, which of course I pushed away in my 20s and 30s, and I don't want anything to do with that. But later in life, I came to understand the deep essence behind the teachings that have anything to do with religion. And it's also, when you study indigenous people, it's right there. It's the wholeness.
The wholeness.
The wholeness is the health. And that's where I find the it. That's where it all fits together for me. And personally, I'm also very okay allowing it to be a mystery. I'm very okay letting it be, I don't know all of it. I don't understand all of it. And I not only trust it, I have absolute faith in it. Well, here I want to honor Charles, because again, he was the first person I encountered who did have the words, who we seem to be viewing from the same perspective, from the same viewpoint. An immediate understanding. We almost, when we began talking, it would be so fast because we just got it. We knew exactly what each other was talking about. And he's brilliant with his languaging and how he has put that forward. And now some of his newer writing is actually pointing towards the different spiritual traditions and how it might connect. And so I bow to him, and if you want to find more of that, you please read him and be with him, and he speaks very eloquently about that. And for me, the intellectual or verbal expression of it isn't the main gift that I have. The main gift is what you're experiencing right now, which is perhaps a more feminine principle of just the embodiment, the being of it. And this is much of what's behind my teaching, no matter what it is, whatever it's called. It's important for me that people inhabit themselves fully and be available to this guidance. And you feel it directly. It becomes really quite clear and specific.
Yeah, you're mentioning Charles Ridley, and yeah, he's a teacher as well. And I was wondering, could you say a little bit about the way you teach, or about some key points? Somehow it's present here.
It is, and I so love how your mind keeps trying to go to naming it, and this is what happens in class and in the early part of the work. This is a natural process. The mind wants to go and make it a thing and name it and understand it from here. But what I'm about, and what the teaching is in terms of its full enfleshment, it's beneath the mind. So it's direct experience, direct transmission, being in the field. And yes, of course I say things, but they usually come out of the field in the moment. I have students who go, "Oh my God, somebody write that down." I go, "Yeah, because I'm not going to remember it." I don't have the capacity, the gift of just sitting down and writing. But in the actual happening of the class, the spontaneous being together in that field, that's where it... Because in the biodynamic language, they talk about inherent treatment plan, right? That everybody's all about feeling that. Well, there's an inherent teaching plan. So if I come in with an idea of what I should say, how I should say it, when I should say it, I'm getting in the way of the inherent teaching plan revealing itself in the class.
And what was very powerful for me when you used the word inhabit.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of helpful cue or...
One of the things that I do say in the beginning of an initiatory class or stillness touch class is I'll describe how our normal, ordinary awareness is functioning. And it's quite outward going. It's a bit vigilant, right? Not because of anything. It's just naturally designed that way, like an antenna to look and view and sense and hear outside. So it's almost like, you know, an old-fashioned submarine, and when it comes to the surface, they send a little periscope up to have a look around. Okay, so that's how our normal, ordinary consciousness and awareness is functioning. In order to inhabit us, we say we need to turn this inward and drop it downward, right? Charles always speaks about being inwardly oriented, okay? So that we now become aware of our direct feeling tones in our body, in the atmosphere. It's the qualities and the characteristics, but not naming. See, there's a difference between thinking and awareness. So we're dropping out of thinking, or thinking can happen on its own, but we just don't get on that bus. We're really coming down to the pure, direct, human creature capacity to sense and perceive.
For me, this inhabiting and being in touch with the feeling tones, and I'm a practitioner as well, it brings me then to an idea of, or image of kind of behaving or acting from.
Yes, that's the key thing, is we need time to learn how to do that, to really be present. And then once we're really present, inhabiting our bodies, to then be open and free with our awareness, not letting our awareness be fixated on any one thing. And from there, that's where we become automatic, suspended, shifting fulcrums of being. Right?
Wow.
It will guide our action. We are directly informed and we will feel impulses and respond in natural ways. It's actually quite simple and quite natural, but we tend to make it more complicated. And doing it, actually living it, does take a bit of practice, a bit of acclimating, because too many times people think, oh yes, remember the periscope? Oh yes, I'm present. All they've done is taken the awareness that's still up here and look down at their bodies and think, oh yes, I'm present. It's very different. There's a presence to stillness. There's an embodied, palpable, felt sense of being present. And sometimes it takes people a while to really get to know themselves and know what that feels like, and then understand when they're not there and when they're there. It's the key thing. It cannot be bypassed. You cannot do this work that we call stillness touch, biodynamic cranial touch. From our disposition, from our perspective, you cannot do this work if you're not present, really abiding. And then the second part, the marriage, there's like a masculine-feminine marriage there, the presence with the open awareness. See, if we even look back to William Sutherland's story of his insight, I don't know if you know the story, but when he noticed the Beauchene skull, when he was at school, and he heard in his inner ear, he heard the voice, a voice that spoke, beveled like the gills of a fish to permit a respiratory articular-like motion. So many of us have heard that in the history. What we fail to recognize is what came before that. Just before that, he notices that his awareness or his attention was directed. He says that, my attention was directed. That's so key. The disposition that he was in to notice that his attention was drawn. He didn't take his attention, it was drawn. So this is what I'm talking about, is learning how to inhabit and abide in that disposition.
I understand it really in the way of this non-activity.
Yes, being in neutral.
Being neutral.
So in the neutral, if you think about a car, when it's in neutral, the engine is on, right? So it's being inhabited. The engine is on, but it's neither engaged in going forward or backwards. So if you think about how you have to either tow or push a car, if it's not in neutral, you can't make it move, right? So that neutrality, that being in the neutral, allows us to be moved, have our attention moved, have our impulses of our protoplasmic body moved.
So I understand it as sort of openness.
Yes, yes. Not passivity. Not passivity. This is a big misconception. When people often first hear the concept of neutral, they may start to understand how to not be efferent, right? But then they end up being too pulled back and too afferent or hyper-feminine, as Charles would put it, and this is too passive. That's also out of balance. So over-masculine, over-feminine, overactive, under-responsive. Neither of those are the neutral. The neutral is just ready and open for its awareness, for its attention to be directed, and the tissues will follow.
So you are saying that this being present and opened or available is somehow very natural for actually each of us, or that's how I understand it in some way.
Yes, it's a way of returning to a natural state, an unconditioned kind of state. And the naturalness is also in recognizing that as we have the capacity to be aware of different states of consciousness, and remember how Charles in his book correlates the different enfoldments with different levels and different states of consciousness. Well, the next part of that is the effect that it has on us, right? The enfleshed or embodied effect. So it changes our perceptual capacity. And all of this is very natural for a human being. We tend to try to split it off, or only certain people have this capacity, and it's like, no, 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 this is a natural and inherent human capacity.
And when there's this inhabiting it, you're saying that it changes our perception.
Yes.
Can you say a little bit?
It's like our fulcrum of our viewpoint will shift and how we perceive things. So according to every enfoldment, there'll be a slightly different viewpoint and perspective that naturally comes with going to a more and more from a bounded to an unbounded state of being, state of consciousness. Just like, we always hear that we are all one. Many spiritual traditions will say this. And not only from spirit, but also from science. From the embryo, from embryogenesis, it's all one, right? Blechschmidt saying that you are your most you at the moment of conception. Everything after that is a differentiation. So as we differentiate, those parts and pieces that come into development through the forces of creation are never separate. We're never separate. And this is about just allowing the awareness to come fully online, and then allowing the viewpoint or the perspective to shift our perceptual capacity. That's when it becomes enfleshed. And that's how then it becomes a guidance for our everyday living and being.
Would there be something that maybe you would like to say at the end, or that maybe that might feel now maybe missing or being good to say so it's more complete?
Well, this practice, I think the main thing I would want to get across is that even though whether it's BCT or stillness touch, that it's often being taught as a table practice of some form or another, that yes, we do that in the classes, of course. And, it's yes and, I do a lot of yes and. And it's really about embodying it, becoming it, living it in your life, taking it off the cushion, like we say in meditation, taking it away from just the table and the practice to where this becomes a way of being and a way of living and a way of relating. So it really does enter every dimension and every aspect of one's life. And it's available for everyone. This is not just for craniosacral people. It isn't.
It's there in everyone and for everyone.
Yes. Yeah. This is really a natural human capacity that is still evolving, and it's available for anyone. So.
Wow, great. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the
Oh, you're
interview.
welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm so thrilled to be here in Prague for the first time and enjoying it very much. Everyone is so kind.